We are in subtraction of fractions and mixed numbers. We're going to be able to solve problems involving the subtraction of fractions and mixed numbers. We're also going to be able to use equivalent fractions as a strategy to add and subtract. We're in lesson 4 of unit 5. Your math message today is to turn to page 163 and solve problems 1 and 2. So go ahead, pause your video, solve problems 1 and 2 in Math Journal number 2 on page 163. You should be finished with problems 1 and 2. And before we look at those, I want to remind you that in the previous lesson, lesson 5.3, we solved addition problems with fractions and mixed numbers. We're going to use similar questions and strategies to help us solve problems in today's lesson. So first of all, let's take a look at problem number 1. The estimate should have been around 3.5, and we get a final answer of 3 3/5 when we took 4 4/5 minus 1 1/5. Luckily, they had a common denominator already, and that should have been pretty easy to solve. Thinking about problem 1 and 2, I want you to ask yourself some questions. How were they similar? How are they different? So in the problems, you want to study them. You want to ask yourself, can you solve them mentally? Do you need to write equivalent fractions with common denominators? Why? Why not? Would it help to rename one of the mixed numbers? Why or why not? So in problem number 2, you can see here, it says that our estimate was a little less than 2. And the answer we got when we subtracted 3 1/3 minus 1 2/3, we got 1 2/3. So in the previous lesson, when we were adding fractions, you sometimes renamed the sum so that it no longer contained a fraction greater than 1. Well, in subtraction problems, the process is a little different. It may be greater than 1. Renaming a mixed number using both a number sentence and a drawing, we can see here the number sentence 3 1/3, we can rename it as equals 2 plus 1 plus 1/3. We can also say that that's 2 plus 3/3 plus 1/3. And we can also say that it's 2 plus 4/3. And we can rename it as 2 4/3. That is going to help us when we move into our subtraction. It's a lot like when we borrow with whole numbers. We're actually going to be borrowing when we're working with mixed numbers. You can see the same thing here in the drawing. On the left-hand side, we see 3 1/3, and on the right-hand side, we see 2 4/3. The two mixed numbers, they're equivalent. They're the exact same value. They are just fair trading, just like we do in with subtraction of whole numbers. So rewriting a problem with a renamed mixed number looks just like this. Here at the top number, we've got 3 1/3, and you can see that we renamed it as 2 4/3. 1 2/3 stays the same. Now, when you see a problem like this, you can subtract the fraction part first. We can take 4/3 minus 2/3, and you can see that we did 4 minus 2 was 2, and we just put the denominator of 3 because it's the same. And then 2 minus 1 gives us that whole number of 1. We have 1 2/3. So renaming and fair trading during whole numbers, same process, except we're doing it with fractions. So look at problems 4 and 3, or 3 and 4, whichever way you want to say it. After examining the problems, make an estimate. So you'll see we have 9/10 minus 8/10, and we have 3/4 minus 1/3. These have similarities and they have differences within these, just like 1 and 2 did. You'll notice that on problem number 3, we have common denominators already, and in problem number 4, we do not. So you are probably going to have to do 1 or 2 more steps extra in problem 4 before actually doing that subtraction. So again, ask yourself, are there any more similarities or differences within these two problems? What solution strategy are you going to use for problem 3? And what are you going to do for problem number 4? Why don't you pause your video now, solve these two problems, don't forget your estimate, and then come back and we'll look at each one individually. So for problem number 3, I did an estimate of just a little bit more than 0. And like we said previously, it already has a common denominator. So I'm going to keep the denominator of 10, and then I'm just going to subtract my numerator. 9 minus 8. 9 minus 8 is 1, and so our answer is 1/10, which we know is very close to 0. It's just a little bit more than 0. For problem 4, we're going to do one more step in there before we can actually do any subtraction. I'm going to find a common denominator, and I use the quick common denominator here, or the QCD, and I knew that 3 times 4 was 12. So my new denominator became 12, and you can see that I did 4 times 3, 3 times 4, got 12 for my new denominators. And we know that when we're making an equivalent fraction, if we do it to the bottom, we can do it to the top. So 3 times 3 is 9, so 3/4 becomes 9/12. 1/3, 1 becomes 4, so 1/3 becomes 4/12. Now we can subtract. The 12 is our denominator, so it's going to stay the same just like when we do addition. The denominator stays the same throughout subtraction. And then we can do 9 minus 4, which is 5, so we get an answer of 5/12. So ask yourself, how did using estimates help you determine whether your answer made sense or not? Let's examine problem 5 and record our estimates. Problem number 5 says 3 1/3 minus 1 1/2. Again, you want to start with that estimate. So look at 3 1/3, look at 1 1/2. I'm going to say I'm going to take 3 minus 1 1/2. So my answer is going to be somewhere around 1 1/2. That's my estimate as I'm looking at this before I do any work. And is it easy to solve this problem mentally? No, not really for me, because I notice that our denominators are not the same. We've got 3 and 2. So I'm going to have to make an equivalent fractions for these. So what can I do to solve this? I'm going to do the quickest common denominator, because I know 3 and 2 can be multiplied to get 6. Remember how you renamed fractions as equivalent fractions with a common denominator when we solved problem 4? We're going to use that strategy in solving this problem. So here are my steps that I've listed out for you. Step 1 is to rename the fractions using the quick common denominator, or the QCD, of 6. You can see here that I turned 3 1/3. I multiplied the top and the bottom by 2, and I got 3 2/6. 1 1/2, I multiplied the top and the bottom of the fraction by 3, and I got 1 3/6. 3 1/3 is equivalent to 3 2/6. 1 1/2 is equivalent to 1 3/6. My next step was to rename 3 2/6 as a mixed number with a larger fraction, because when I'm looking at this, I cannot take 2 minus 3. So I need to borrow. I need some fair trade in there. So I know that 2 plus 6/6 plus 2/6 is the same as 3 2/6. So that becomes 2 8/6, because you can see the 6 plus the 2 here. So 2 8/6 is equivalent to 3 2/6, which is equivalent to 3 1/3. All three of those have the exact same value. They're just written in a different way. Now I can take 2 8/6 minus 1 3/6. 8 minus 3 is 5. The denominator of 6 days. 2 minus 1 is 1. We get a final answer of 1 5/6. And number 6 here I have for you already written out. The estimate was a little less than 6. And you can see that we got a final answer of 5 8/15. 5 8/15. So taking a look at this answer, I can see that I did a quick common denominator, because 5 times 3, and then I borrowed, and I turned the 10 into a 9. So I'm going to go ahead and write this out. I'm going to show the work here. So 10 1/5 is going to become 10 and 3/15. So 3 over 15. And it's going to subtract 4 and 10/15. And how I got those is I took 5 times 3, which is 15, so 1 times 3, and then I took 3 times 5 is 15, so I took 2 times 5 and got 10. When I'm looking at this, I know that I cannot do 3 minus 10, so I need to borrow from that 10. So my 10 and 3/15 becomes 9 and 18/15 because I took out 15/15. You can see that there. And now I can subtract my 4 and 10/15 and put that in there. Now I can take 18 minus 10, which is 8. And we keep our denominator of 15, and 9 minus 4 is 5, which gives us this final answer of 5 and 8/15. So turn to page 164, and this is for you to do and check your understanding. So we've got some problems here. Number one, you're going to fill in the missing number. What you're doing is just creating equivalent mixed numbers. You're going to borrow from the whole number and put it into the fraction for number 1a, b, and c. You're going to look at those. On number 2, you're going to estimate, and you're going to solve 7/12 minus 3/8. Don't forget, you got to have a common denominator. Number 3, we've got a number story. Jake has 2 pet guinea pigs named Fluffy and Scruffy. Oh, how cute. Fluffy is 8 1/8 inches long. Scruffy is 10 1/4 inches long. How much longer is Scruffy than Fluffy? You need a number model, you need an estimate, and then you need to answer. Scruffy is blank inches longer than Fluffy. Don't forget cubes. I'm going to write this out for you. It's always important when you come to us in the story problem to use cubes. It's going to help you be successful. Remember to circle your numbers. Box in any clue words. And underline, oops, I underlined the wrong thing. Underline your question. Forget that. How much longer is Scruffy than Fluffy? Longer than. Use all these things to evaluate, write out some notes, and solve. I'm going to tell you right now, I see how much longer is Scruffy than Fluffy. That's going to tell me that you're going to do a subtraction problem, which makes sense considering what we are practicing in this lesson. And then on the next slide, problem 4, Rachel is traveling by plane from Chicago to San Diego. The flight will take 4 1/4 hours. The plane took off 1 2/3 hours ago. How much longer will Rachel be on the plane? Again, this is your turn. Use cubes. Let that help you figure out what you're doing, what numbers you're using, and how you're going to solve it. Don't forget your number model and your estimate. And 5 is a subtraction problem, but lucky for you, that one has common denominator already. And I'd like you to try number 6. Take a whole number minus a mixed number. What do you think you're going to do there? So go ahead and pause and complete these problems. Come back and we'll check our. All right. Looking back at number 1, you can see that 5 1/4 equals 4 5/4. We take 4/4 out of the 5 and put it into the fraction. B, 8 7/9 actually equals 7 16/9. We take 9/9 out of 8 and put that into the 7/9. C, 4 3/6 equals 3 9/6. Number 2, you should have your own estimate, and you should see mine was between 0 and 1/2, and the actual answer is 5 24. 3, after using cubes, you should have found the number model 10 1/4 minus 8 1/8 equals G. I put G for guinea pig. You can put whatever letter you want. An estimate should maybe be a little more than 2 inches, and Scruffy is actually 2 and 1/8 inches longer than Fluffy. Number 4, after using cubes, you should have found 4 and 1/4 minus 1 and 2/3 equals F. Again, you can put whatever letter you want for that. My estimate was a little more than 2 hours, but actually Rachel will be on the plane for 2 and 7/12 more hours. And then subtracting 4 and 1/6 minus 3 and 2/6, sample answer of an estimate was about 1, and the actual answer is 5/6. And number 6, 9 minus 4 and 7/8, sample answer is about 4. What we did here is we took 9 minus 4 and 7/8. A lot of people might have thought the answer was going to be 5 and 7/8, and that would be incorrect. What you need to remember is that we've got no fraction here, so I need to borrow. I'm going to turn 9 into 8 and 8/8. 8 and 8/8, because I know 8 plus 1 is 9. Then you can take 8/8 minus 7/8, which gives us that 1/8 right here, and then 8 minus 4 equals 4. That is what you do when you have a whole number minus a mixed number. You can still borrow, you can still fair trade, you can create your own fraction here. That is the end of this lesson's material. But I do, before we get in the video, I do want to let you know that on page 165 is great practice. This will definitely be helpful. Take a look, and there's also the SRB pages. Don't forget, those are always there for you. It's about, our place values with decimals. This is a great opportunity to review and practice what we've learned in the past, and just doing more work there. Feel free to do these 2 pages, this page 165, problems 1 through 7. Again, great practice, and you can always check those with a friend and use the SRB to check your work as well. This is the end of our lesson 5.4. Again, we were doing subtraction of fractions and mixed numbers, along with a little review of some decimal place value.